My Life and Struggle, Autobiography of Badshah Khan, A Change of Prison. Before I left Peshawar prison, they had fettered my feet again, and when I arrived at Dera Ismail Khan prison, the fetters were removed. I was put in a cell, and the following day I was given 20 seers of corn to grind, on a grindstone, of course. But maggots appeared to have had a go at the corn first, for not one grain was hard, so it was not a hard job this time. The jailer was an elderly Muslim who had been a soldier before, but he became a prison official. He could not speak English and was due to retire. The superintendent of the prison was an Englishman who could not speak any language but English. Therefore, all the work in the prison was done by Gangaram, the deputy jailer. The elderly Muslim jailer was all right, but Gangaram was very dirty man and the kind of person who took bribes. He used to stir up quarrels among the prisoners and then demand bribes from them for not taking any action against them. One day I was grinding corn. The jailer came and said, "You may stop grinding corn." I said, "Why?" He replied, "You are the only one in this prison who is here on behalf of God. How could I justify myself before him if I made you grind corn?" To please him, I stopped, but as soon as he had gone, I started again. But he was watching me through the small hole in the door, and after a few minutes, he came in again and said, I allowed you to stop. Why are you still grinding?" Not far from me is in the next row of cells, another prisoner was also grinding corn. I said to the jailer, "Do you see that man? Well, there, you have a robber and a murderer grinding corn. Why should I mind grinding corn for my cause, which is pure and holy?" The following day, the jailer told the man in charge of grinding to give me flour to grind instead of corn. But when the man brought me the flour, he also gave me some corn. He said, "If the superintendent comes around, please pretend to be grinding corn." I asked him why. He said, "If he sees that I've given you flour, he'll sack me." "I don't want you to lose your job," I said, "and I don't like lying either, so please let me grind the corn like everybody else." The food in the prison was terrible. They must have put cement in the bread. It was impossible to chew it. The vegetables were also so bad that even the prison cat, when I offered her some one day, refused to eat them. The jailer had very kindly said that he could have food sent from his own home for me, but I asked him not to. The man who took round the milk wanted to give me some. "Doctor's orders," he said, but I refused that too, for milk was not a part of my present diet, and I did not want to take anybody else's ration. Then Gangaram began to send his agent to pester me for bribes. "Give Gangaram some money," he said, "and he will get you out of this solitary cell. We Peshawaris feel very ashamed to think of you in this solitary cell and grinding corn as well. If you don't want to bribe Gangaram, we are prepared to pay him from our own pockets." "Listen," I told him. "Bribing is a social evil. I will have no part of it. You know that I am here because I refuse to furnish security. If I have to bribe anyone, I may as well pay the security." Gangaram also corrupted the young prisoners. Anyone who paid him 5 rupees could have a younger prisoner to stay with him in the cell for the night. One day I asked the jailer, "You are a good man, Muslim man. You pray 5 times a day, but you don't protect the honor of young Muslim boys in this prison. How are you going to account for that before the Almighty? Aren't you ashamed of yourself?" In other prisons in Peshawar, where the jailers are Hindus, nobody dares to touch the young Muslim boys. The food continued to be bad. One day when I was busy grinding corn, the superintendent came to my cell. A small bowl of vegetables was still lying on the floor. I showed it to the superintendent and said, "I offered this food to the cat, but she wouldn't touch it. Yet you expect human beings to eat it." The superintendent, who was a doctor, looked at the vegetables and said, "There is nothing wrong with this food." I thought it was no use arguing at this point further. So, changing the subject, I said, "Would you mind taking a look at the man in the cell opposite? He is in fetters and so am I. But look at the difference. I grind the same amount of corn as he does every day. He is a prisoner and so am I. But is my crime the same as his? Tell me, how do you treat prisoners like me in your country? The superintendent left the cell without a word. But the following day, I was sent to the workshop to make envelopes. And when I saw superintendent again, he told me, it won't be long now before you are taken out of the solitary cell. There were prisoners from all over the frontier province in the workshop. They often quarreled amongst themselves and even came to blows, mostly over the boys. They all used to come and talk to me. I told them to stop fighting and to give up their vices. And I was happy to see that they listened to me. Many of the prisoners were afraid of the hard work and they used to bribe Gangaram in order to get out of it. I told them to also give up this bad habit. When Gangaram saw his business dwindle, he conspired to get me removed to another prison. He reported to the superintendent that I was creating trouble for him, that I was trying to propagate my ideas amongst the prisoners, and that he would not be responsible for maintaining discipline unless I was removed. In fact, he made out quite a case against me. The superintendent came and questioned me. He knew very well that Gangaram was lying. But it was a question of discipline, and an Englishman will go to any length to maintain discipline. So I was transferred to Dera Ghazi Khan prison, having spent 2 months of my sentence in Peshawar prison and 2 months here. During the 4 months, I had lost 45 pounds in weight. The bad food had affected my gums, and I had pyorrhea. On the day when I was to be transferred, a police car with all its curtains drawn drove up to the gate. My feet were fettered, the handcuffs were tied at my wrists, and an iron collar my neck. I was wearing the prison clothes that had always been too tight and too short. I could not look at myself. God only knows what a sight I was for others. I was put into the motor car and transported to Dera Ghazi Khan railway station. We missed the train and had to spend the night at the station. Nobody was allowed to come near me. Neither was I allowed to go near anyone. They did not even remove my handcuffs. My escorts were all Pathans, and the sub-inspector in charge, Nadir Khan, was a man from my district. He was known as a boy. In the morning when the train came, I was put in a so-called servants' compartment. Great care was taken, especially at the stations where the train stopped, that nobody should come near to see me, who I was. We got down at the Carte, where I was handed over to another escort. The officer in charge was a Hindu. He took off my handcuffs and said, "Come on, let's walk up and down the platform." As we were strolling along, Nadir Khan came up to us and said to the Hindu officer, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I am done for." The Hindu officer, a police officer, said, "Don't worry, he is in my charge now and I will take full responsibility. You may go." We had to cross the Indus River. On the other side, I was put in a tonga, and we finally arrived at Dera Ghazi Khan prison. When we arrived at the prison gate, I found Ubaidullah Rashid Khan, the son of Colonel Ubaidullah Majid, and Lala Dani Chand Ambwali, waiting to meet me. Some of his friends and relations had also come with him. As I was going inside, he said to me, "When I saw you arriving, I was sure that a very dangerous robber and murderer was being taken to prison." Once inside, my fetters were removed. This was a small prison housing political prisoners from Punjab. There were 2 barracks, one for C-class prisoners and the other for special class prisoners. I was put with the C-class prisoners because there was no other class for the prisoners from my province. But at least the chapatis were good here. The superintendent was a very good man. He used to give the political prisoners wheat, which they themselves cleaned, ground into flour, and made into chapatis. They also cooked their own vegetables, but the best thing for me was that my fetters had been removed. All the C-class prisoners were Sikhs and Hindus. They were very kind and they treated me with great courtesy. The work we had to do here was rope making, but I could not manage it, and I asked the superintendent, who was a very nice Muslim, to give me some other work instead. The special class prisoners had discovered my identity, and they urged the superintendent to transfer me to their barracks. He not only agreed to that, but also gave me a charkha. that is a spinning wheel, and changed my prison work from rope making to spinning. It was by God's infinite mercy and grace that I was transferred to this prison. I don't know how long I could have carried on and persevered my health and preserved my health in the other prison. Apart from that, I could not have been in a better and more well bred company than I was here, and I took full advantage of this opportunity to get to know the Punjabi people. For all of us, it was an excellent chance to become more familiar with with each other's ideas and beliefs. Most of the other prisoners were released long before I was, and they wrote to the papers about me. They protested against the government's treatment of me as a C-class prisoner in such a strong term that in the end the government had to treat me as a special class prisoner. The superintendent sent me to the Lahore Central Jail for dental treatment. As I have already mentioned, my teeth and gums were very badly affected by the poor quality of food at Dera Ismail Khan prison. The jailer here, one Khan Alauddin Khan, had no sympathy for nationalist prisoners. On the contrary, to get into the good books of the British, he was extremely harsh with them. In return, the British had given him Carte blanch to treat the prisoners in any way that he fancied. In return, the British had given him carte blanche to treat the prisoners in any way that he fancied, and his treatment of political prisoners was particularly bad. There were both Khilafat movement and Congress movement prisoners, but though I belonged to the Khilafat movement, I was put in a solitary cell and not with the other Khilafat movement prisoners. There were a number of Sikhs in these solitary cells. They had been put here because when they were in the barracks, they had all been chanting in unison, Sat Sari Akal, God is the truth. A great feeling of power and strength had taken possession of the Sikhs, and the worse they were treated, the stronger and more powerful they felt. When the Khilafat movement prisoners found out that I had been sent here and that I was kept in a solitary cell, they all raised their voices in one mighty protest. The very next day, I was lodged with the political prisoners, and I met Agha Safdar, Malik Lal Khan, Lala Lajpat Rai, and other Congress leaders, and we had the opportunity to talk and have lengthy discussions. With Agha Safdar and Malik Lal Khan, I began to study the Holy Quran, but Malik Lal Khan soon gave up. He said that I interpreted the Quran in my own way. The poor man was used to follow the beaten track, and he had not learned to think for himself. Therefore, our independent interpretation made no impression on him at all. A few days after my arrival in Lahore Central Jail, the dental surgeon came. His name was Dr. Prem Nath. And as I was to find out, he was indeed the image of love. I was taken to the office where the doctor examined my teeth, extracted a few, and cleaned the rest. He told me that I had Pyorrhoea, and he prescribed medicine as well as nourishing and balancing diet. I asked the doctor how much I owed him for his services. I told him that I was well-to-do and able to pay his fee. But he refused to take any payment. When I insisted, he said, "Listen, what crime have you committed? You are here because of your love of your country and your people. I would be ashamed of myself if I accepted a payment from you. I can't make great sacrifices like you, but I can at least offer you this small service." Then he picked up his bag and left. A few days later, I was sent back to Dera Ghazi Khan prison. I was taken by train under the police escort. It was summer and a very hot afternoon. We had to change trains at Sher Shah station. An interesting incident occurred. The police officer in charge was a very nice man, and he wanted to take me to the waiting room, but we found out that the door was closed. The police officer knocked, someone opened the door, and we saw a Pir Sahib, a Muslim holy man, and his murids, his disciples, who were taking an afternoon nap. The police officer brought a chair for me to sit down, and then he saluted and went outside. One of the Pir Sahib's murids was working the fan, that hung from the ceiling. But my arrival had disturbed the Pir Sahib's afternoon nap. He had seen how the police officer brought a chair for me and saluted me, and somehow he was under the impression that I was a high ranking police officer. There was a lovely little child in the Pir Sahib's party. It appeared that he was a great Pir from Nisa Sharif, and he had been to India to collect alms and offerings. Judging by the amount of luggage he had, boxes, suitcases, he must have collected a considerable amount. The child came and sat by me. She was not afraid or shy at all. That made me feel happy, for I love small children. Little later, when I went outside, she followed me. As the Pir Sahab still thought I was some high official, he did not mind and he did not say anything. But outside the platform, someone recognized me, and soon I was surrounded by people. When the Pir Sahab realized that I was a Khilafat man, he sent one of his murids to call the child back. But she did not want to leave me and started weeping. In the end, the police officer had to take her back to the waiting room. Then our train came in, and soon I was back in Dera Ghazi Khan prison. Life in British prison. In my barrack at Dera Ghazi Khan prison, there were a number of Hindus and Sikhs, but only a few Muslims. There was a teacher, Gurdit Hamal, a worthy man of whom I became very fond. When he prayed, he used to chant Shanti, 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 but that did not make him a peaceful man. He used to lose his temper at the slightest provocation. When the Sikhs gathered together, they chanted Shri Jaye, Ta Jaye, Mera Sikh Dharam Na Jaye. I may even lose my head, but I will not lose my Sikh faith. I greatly enjoyed listening to them. I think the reason why the Sikhs can put so much more feeling and emotion into their religious practices than the Hindus and the Muslims is that their holy book, the Guru Granth Sahib, is written in their mother tongue. Therefore, they understand the teachings and the prayers of their religion better. The Hindus say their prayers in Sanskrit and the Muslims in Arabic. And many Hindus and Muslims say their prayers without really understanding the meaning. Actually, we spent our time very pleasantly in this prison, and we were able to remove to a certain extent the false impression the British had given Hindus of us, the Pakhtuns. One day a Hindu friend said to me, I have been told that the Pathans drink human blood. Do they really? Oh yes, I replied, frequently. Good heavens, he cried out. Then he asked again, but why do they drink it? Because it is very tasty, I said. Good heavens, he cried again. Then I asked him, my friend, from where did you get this idea? Have you ever been to the Pathan country? Have you ever seen a Pathan, for that matter, except me, of course? No, I haven't, he admitted. Then who told you this? I asked him. His reply was that he had read about it in some book. One day we heard that the Inspector General of the prisons, Colonel Wade, was to visit our prison. He was known to be a very rude man. He treated the prisoners as if he was the Almighty himself. He was in every respect an unpleasant person. When he entered the barracks and saw that the Hindus were wearing Gandhi caps and the Sikhs black turbans, he became very angry with the jailer and inquired why did he allow this. Our superintendent, who was also a British man, but a very kind-hearted man, told the colonel, it is my fault, not theirs. Before the Inspector General left the prison, he gave orders to take the Gandhi caps and the black turbans off the heads of the prisoners. We did not hear about this order till the next day, however, when it was read out to us. Sardar Khadak Singh told the superintendent, but sir, we are special class prisoners and the government allows us to wear our own clothes. Therefore, we can dress as we like, and the Inspector General's order is illegal and violation of our right. But the superintendent said, what can I do about it? I can only carry out the orders. Therefore, I am telling you to remove your Gandhi caps and turbans. We did not argue with him because we knew it was to make no difference. But after he left, we sat down together and discussed what was to be done. We came to the conclusion that as we had permission to wear our own clothes, that implied that it is our that the right to wear the kind of clothes we like, and if that happened to be Gandhi caps and turbans, nobody had the right to forbid us. Therefore, we decided we would not obey this order. The next day, when it was found that the prisoners were still wearing Gandhi caps and turbans, they were taken to the office one by one to have their headgear removed. We then decided not to wear any other clothes either except the loin cloth. Wearing a Gandhi cap or a turban has no special meaning to the Northwest frontier people, and I was not used to wearing it either. But I told my friends that I was ready to join them in defying the order. They would not allow me to do this, however, as they said, this was purely a Punjabi affair. When the Deputy Commissioner of Dera Ghazi Khan, Mr. Wilson, came to visit the prison, Sardar Khadak Singh spoke to him on behalf of all the prisoners. He told him that we were allowed to wear our own clothes and that this right could not suddenly be taken away from us. The Deputy Commissioner said, "The right to wear your own clothes does not apply to the caps or turbans." Sardar Khadak Singh said, "Do you mean to say that caps and turbans are not clothes?" The Deputy Commissioner said, "No." And another argument would have followed when suddenly the Sikhs began to chant, "Sat Sari Akal, jo bole so nikhal." The air was filled with the roar, and the Deputy Commissioner rushed to the office where he decided that the prisoners must be punished for this demonstration. The next day, Superintendent announced that anyone who refused to dress properly would be charged according to the prison rules and regulations and taken to the court. The Muslims then complied with the order, but not the Sikhs and Hindus. They were duly taken to the court, and the magistrate sentenced every one of them to an additional 9 months in prison. C-class prisoners like myself were allowed to write one letter every 3 months, and any letters that were sent to them were given to them only once every 3 months. Consequently, I knew very little of what was going on in my district. Relatives with whom I was allowed to receive once every 3 months brought me some news from the province, but that did not keep me up to date. I heard that our movement had started with a bang. In those days, people were not yet meeting minded. Moreover, the government did not allow people to attend meetings, and that made them afraid too. My colleagues hit upon the idea of holding meetings in the mosques. People would meet the Malood Sharif, that is, a meeting where the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad are discussed, prayers are said, and then salam is sung. And then the president of our society would give them a lecture. The students from our schools were always in the majority at those meetings. Ghani, my son, was now 9 years old. Wali could already read the Quran very well. Ghani made excellent speeches, and at the end of a speech he always said, "Oh people, go and ask this government why they are keeping my father in a prison. Go and ask them what crime has he committed." This made a deep impression on our people. Their hearts were touched and a new vigor was born in them. In short, my imprisonment was of great benefit to my people. They had become interested in education, and they had also become more politically conscious. Because of my imprisonment, they now looked upon our schools with love and sympathy, and they even began to offer help. My mother was very upset and unhappy for me, and the letter I was allowed to write once every 3 months was always addressed to her. Her one great desire was to see me again. She would have come to visit me in prison, but she was very old, and Dera Ghazi Khan was very far away, and between us lay the Indus River. Much as I would have loved to see her, I had discouraged her from undertaking such an arduous journey. Sometimes I wish I had not, for God took her away from me before I returned home. Towards the end of 1920, she fell ill and passed away after a few days, but nobody told me. I found out from the newspapers, and I was deeply depressed. When I returned home after my release, my sister told me that towards the end of her life, my mother was always speaking of me. When her last moments came, she said, "Where is Ghaffar? Has he not come back yet?" She passed away with my name on her lips. Of all the prisoners in Dera Ghazi Khan, I was serving the longest sentence, 3 years. Other prisoners were serving 6 or 9 months, so at the most 1 year's sentence. Soon, many of the 6-month prisoners were released, and so would the others have been if this agitation over the Gandhi caps and turbans had not happened. When they had served their additional 9 months, the superintendent told them, "You had better put on the proper clothes, or I shall have to charge you again." This time the Hindus also complied with the order, but the Sikhs did not, and they were all sentenced to another 9 months imprisonment. Those who had complied with the order requested the superintendent to have them transferred to another prison, and their request was granted. When the Sikhs had completed their second 9 months term, and realized that they would have been charged again and again till they complied with the order, they also resiled and asked to be transferred. Their request too was granted. Only Sardar Khadak Singh and I were left. Khadak Singh was a very powerful man, firm and immovable as a mountain. Nobody could order him about. Once again, the Inspector General visited the prison, proud and arrogant as ever. When he saw us, he said, "Well, Khadak Singh." Sardar Khadak Singh replied, "Yes, Wade." The Inspector General was furious and gave orders that Sardar Khadak Singh be put in a solitary cell, and that the milk specially prescribed for him by the doctor be stopped forthwith. Sardar Khadak Singh was taken away and put in a solitary cell in the prison hospital. I was now all alone in the barrack, which was next to the hospital. The only way we could see each other was through a hole in the door. The Sardar soon became very weak, and I did my best to give him some food through the hole in the door, as often as I could manage. Sardar Khadak Singh was a fine man. In spite of all his miseries, he never lost his courage and determination. As more prisoners arrived, the prison authorities decided that they needed barrack that I was occupying, and I was transferred to Miawali prison. At Miawali, there were no barracks, only solitary cells. There were many political prisoners, Congress, Khilafat, and the Guru Ke Bagh prisoners. They too had been transferred here from Dera Ghazi Khan prison. They were on friendly terms with the prison authorities. There were separate kitchens for Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs. Maulana Iqbal from Panipat and Khilafat movement prisoners serving a 5-year sentence was in charge of our kitchen. He was an excellent cook, but he used to put far too much red pepper into the curry, which did not agree with me. Akhtar Ali Khan, the son of Alauddin Zafar Ali Khan, was also a prisoner here. The superintendent was a queer person. It was very hot in Miawali and dust storms occurred frequently, but the water in the well was very nice and cool. The superintendent used to take political prisoners into the courtyard where the well was so that they could have a bath. He often asked me to go with them, but I always refused. There was a tower in the center of the courtyard, and in the evening, after the roll call, the superintendent and the political prisoners often sat there chatting. The superintendent asked me to join them, but I refused that too, because I knew that the prison officers, although they spend all their time with the prisoners, never think one as a human being, but always as a prisoner. They have a queer sense of mentality. One evening, Akhtar Ali and some other political prisoners were sitting by the tower with the superintendent when the prison doctor came. All the chairs were occupied. Nobody got up, and the doctor arrived, nor did anybody offer him a chair. The superintendent very rudely told everybody to get up and go away. The superintendent's rude behavior hurt and shocked me, but they themselves did not seem to mind it. The next day, I saw them all standing by the office doors, begging the guard to get permission for them to go and sit by the tower again. Lion and the Sheep. In 1924, a few days before I was due to be released, the warder told me that I was to be transferred to Peshawar. The police escort took me to the station, and we travelled as far as Khairabad, where we got down and where I was handed over to the Peshawar police. They had a car waiting for me to carry me for the rest of the way, but at Mardan the tire punctured and we had to leave the car there. We then took a tanga to Charsadda, where I was produced before the assistant commissioner, who at the time was Dilawar Khan. He ordered the police to take me to my village and release me there. When we arrived at Osmanzai, they set me free very near my school. The school time was just over and the boys were coming out. When they saw me, they all came running towards me and surrounded me. The people had planned to go to Attak to welcome me. From there, I was to be brought back to Usmanzai on horseback in procession. But the government was not in favor of such a big reception. They thought it would give too much publicity to me. So they released me a few days earlier than was expected and thus nipped the plan in the bud. During the 3 years I had spent in prison, my people had taken a considerable step forward. Our school had made very good progress. The credit for this success must go to the boys and the teachers. After my arrest, they had all gone out to serve the country. They had taken real advantage of my imprisonment, and their unstinted labor was a blessing to the community. The anniversary of our school was near. In fact, it had been postponed till my release. It was a great success. Thousands of people attended and was full of love and enthusiasm. Speeches were made, poems were recited, and on behalf of the people, I was presented with a gift, and the title Fakhre-Afghan, Pride of the Pathans, was bestowed upon me. When I was asked to make a speech, I told the gathering the story of the lion cub and the sheep. One day the lioness attacked a flock of sheep. She was pregnant, and during the attack she gave birth to a cub. The lioness died and her cub was left with the flock of sheep. One of the ewes adopted the cub, and it grew up among the sheep. It grazed with the sheep and learned to bleat like the sheep. One day, a lion from the forest came and attacked the sheep. The lion was very surprised to see a lion cub running hither and thither with the frightened sheep, bleating like a sheep and obviously as afraid of him as the sheep. He tried to go near the cub, but it ran away. At last, he succeeded in separating the lion cub from the flock and took it to the pool. Look in the water, he told the cub, and see your reflection. You are not a sheep, you are a lion. Stop being afraid. Stop bleating like a sheep. Roar like a lion. O Pathans, I said, I had finished the story. O Pathans, so also I say to you, you are not sheep, you are lions. You are lions, but you have been brought up in slavery. Stop bleating like sheep, roar like lions. My speech must have annoyed the government, but the people were delighted. And when the meeting came to an end, they all went back to their villages, the words roar like lions still echoing in their ears. In May 1926, my elder sister was going to Hajj and she requested me to go with her. I agreed, and both my wife and I accompanied her. We left by a steamer from Karachi. Though we had tried hard, we had not been able to get either first or second class accommodation. That had all been booked well in advance. So we were obliged to travel third class. It was very hot and the third class was crowded. Almost as soon as the ship left Karachi, we became seasick and we could not touch any food. When the ship anchored at Cameroon, we went ashore and had a meal. The ship left the next morning, but then I was struck down with influenza. An Arab second-class passenger, may God reward him, very kindly took me to his cabin and gave me his own berth, and thus saved my life. When we disembarked at Jeddah, I had recovered. A guide was waiting for us and took us to his place. We had a lot of luggage, and because of the guide's carelessness, it was left behind on the ship. We never recovered it. Quite possibly, the guide himself had stolen it. The next day, we left Jeddah and went to Makkah. In Makkah, the days were unbearably hot and the nights were bitterly cold. Most pilgrims were not used to that kind of climate, and they suffered very much. Many fell seriously ill and died. It was the year when Saudi Arabia had taken possession of Makkah and defeated the Sharif of Makkah. The Saudi Arabian government ruled with an iron hand, and soon peace was established everywhere. During the reign of the Sharif of Makkah, there was great unrest in the country. Caravans of pilgrims were robbed, and the Sharif himself used to take a share of the loot. That year, Saudi Arabia had invited Muhammad Ali, Shaukat Ali, Zafar Ali Khan, and many other leaders from India to take part in a conference conference of Muslims from all over the world. They arrived while I was in Makkah, and I also participated in the conference, which, however, served no particular purpose. No problem of any importance was discussed, and instead of promoting harmony, the conference ended in discord. After the Hajj, my sister went to Medina, and from there she returned home. I was still suffering from the after effects of influenza, and so my wife and I decided to go to Taif, which is a very pleasant and cool place, and where I hope to regain my health. All the beautiful bungalows the Turks built in Taif have now fallen into ruins. We were fortunate for on the way to Taif, we met a Pathan who lived there, and he took us to his very comfortable home where we spent a few days peaceful and happy. Both he and his wife spoke Pashto, but not their children. One day I had an interesting experience. I was taking a walk outside the town when a long bearded man in an embroidered robe called me. "Oh Sheikh, come over here." When I was quite near, he said, "I can show you a hair from the beard of the Prophet, and a stone that bears his footprint." I replied, "I have not come here to see relics. I have come here to look for the patience and the courage of the Holy Prophet, who braved the journey through the desert from Makkah and came here for the welfare of his people. For the welfare of the people of Taif." And how did the people of Taif receive him? They threw stones at him, set their dogs at him, and beat him. But in spite of all this cruelty, the Prophet did not despair of the people, but he prayed for them, saying, "O God, be thou their guide, and show them thy ways." The bearded man did not reply. From Taif, we returned to Makkah, where we spent a few days. Then we went to Jeddah, and a few days later to Medina. We were 6 men and 4 women in our caravan. Of course, there were no motor cars there in those days. We rode camels and traveled by night. All around us was desert and silence and peace. We stayed in Medina for a few days, and from there we intended to go to Jerusalem. We first went to Rabak, which is only a small town, where we boarded a ship that took us to Suez, and we covered the last lap of our journey to Jerusalem by train. A very sad thing happened in Jerusalem. My wife fell down a staircase and died. She left me 2 children, a son and a daughter. Losing my life's companion so suddenly was a terrible shock to me. I never married again, though I was still a young man. I decided that there would be no room for another marriage in my life of dedication to the service of my country. I spent several days in Palestine and visited all the famous historical places. Then I traveled to Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq. I made pilgrimage to Najaf and Karbala, and after a few days stay in at Baghdad, I went to Basra and took a steamer to Karachi. But what a difference there was between this ship and the ship we had started our journey on. This time I traveled in comfort. I stayed in Karachi for only a few days and then returned to Usmanzai. Experiments with journalism. Our province could not boast of even one national newspaper. Therefore, I planned to publish a journal for the Pashtuns in their own language, Pashto, a national journal in the true sense of the word. I had to put in a great deal of hard work, but finally in 1928, my efforts bore fruit and the first issue of Pashtun appeared. Pashtun became the northwest frontier province, what Gandhiji's Harijan was to India. Badshah Khan used to spread his ideas and also make important announcements. It was banned by the British, and the Pakistan government forbade its publication. It earned a good name for itself during its brief span of life. At the time, the Pashtuns did not have much feeling or love for their own language. In fact, they hardly knew that Pashto was their own national language. A nation is known and recognized by its language, and without a language of its own, a nation cannot really be called a nation. A nation that forgets its own language will eventually disappear from the map altogether. It is great pity that the Pashtuns were so careless that whenever they settled, they learned to speak the local language and gave up speaking their own language. They never thought of teaching others their language. They were not even interested in reading or writing their own language, leave alone the illiterate people. When I asked the educated Pakhtuns to subscribe to a Pashto newspaper, their own newspaper in their own language, after all, they said, had anything worthwhile ever been written in Pashto? I replied, if it hasn't, surely that is not the fault of the Pashto language. Look at any other language in the world, and you will see that it has grown and developed from the level of our own language. No language has ever dropped ready-made from the sky. But in other countries, there were people who cherished their language, who worked for its development and enrichment. A language does not develop by magic, though our English educated scholars seem to think so. Who amongst us has ever cherished and loved our language enough to make an effort to develop and enrich it? Certainly not the mullahs. They have never tried of are never tired of telling people that Pashto was the language spoken in hell. And nobody had enough sense or intelligence to ask the mullahs how they knew this or when they had last been to hell. These were the conditions and the mentality of the people when the first issue of Pakhtun came out. The journal rapidly gained popularity, and soon Pakhtuns all over the country and indeed all over the world were taking out subscriptions. Pakhtuns living in America not only helped in the publication of the journal, but in enlarging its circulation, but they also gave substantial financial help. I had been told that in the time of King Amanullah, Pakhtun became very popular in Afghanistan. It made the people aware of their own language. They came to love it and were interested in it to such an extent that King Amanullah and some of his friends were soon publishing a Pashto journal of their own called Jaga Pakhtun. Amanullah Khan had become so pro-Pashto that he had ordered all the government employees to learn the language. He gave them 3 years to accomplish this, and then he wanted to make Pashto the national language. The British viewed this development as with disfavor. Only 9 issues of Jag Pakhtun had come out when they intervened. They used the mullahs, the elders, and the religious leaders and the theologians to create disturbances in the country by pronouncing King Amanullah a kafir. They gave him no peace till he left the country and went to Italy. They did not realize how much harm they were doing to themselves. King Amanullah was ever dreaming of the welfare of his people, and all his efforts were directed towards making them prosperous. He was also always working for the progress of the country and the happiness of his people. But they rose up against him as if he were not their friend but their enemy. And finally, they drove him out of the country. Such gross ingratitude is a sin before God, and he has punished them for it. He gave them Badshah Sakka. Instead of making progress, the Afghans saw their country fall into decline. We felt the destruction of Afghanistan as if it were our own ruin. And actually, the British led Afghanistan into ruin because of us. We were deeply impressed and affected by the progress we saw in Afghanistan, and the British did not like that. Neither did they want to follow their example. We tried to help Afghanistan with men and money as far as possible, and we continued to do so till Nadir Khan came into power. I went to India during the time to get moral and financial support for the cause of Afghanistan. In Punjab, I met Dr. Iqbal, Zafar Ali Khan, Mulk Lal Khan, and other Muslim leaders. After I had visited Dr. Iqbal, my Khilafat colleagues in Lahore asked me, why did you go and see Dr. Iqbal? He is of no use. He is a poet, and all that he does is writing quatrains and odes. I was surprised, therefore, to see that the same Punjabi, now Pakistani leaders and the newspapers who did not have a good word to say about Dr. Iqbal when he was alive never tried singing never tired of singing his praises now that he is no more. They even say that he was the creator of the idea of Pakistan. This is not the fault of Punjabi Muslims. Nations that are alive value honor and honor the living, and the dying nations value the honor and honor the dead. We Muslims have always honored the dead, but we are not even aware that many great men worthy of honor are living amongst us today. From Lahore, I went to Lucknow, where Congress meeting was being held. Gandhiji and Jawaharlal Nehru were also attending this meeting. This was in 1928, and it was the first time that I had the privilege of meeting them both. Until then, I did not know them at all, but my brother Dr. Khan Sahab was very friendly with Jawaharlal because they used to live in the same place in England, and they had studied at the university together. My brother had given me a letter of introduction to Nehru. Chaudhry Khaliqul Zaman had invited Jawaharlal to dinner after the meeting, and he very kindly took me along. After dinner, Nehru and I had a lengthy discussion about Afghanistan. From Lucknow, I went to Delhi. On Friday, when I went to the mosque to say my prayers, I met Maulana Muhammad Ali there. He was a fine man, and he has always been very kind to me. But his brother Shaukat Ali was a different man. He had great influence over Muhammad Ali, and he used to misguide him. That annoyed me, and therefore I tried to avoid meeting Muhammad Ali. But one day when he saw me, he came up to me and said, smiling happily, "We don't really care for Pathans, you know." I gave him tit for tat and said, "And we don't really care for the leaders who allow themselves to be misguided by others." And I added, "Maulana Sahab, what you are saying about Amanullah Khan is precisely what the British are saying about you." This seemed to shake him, for he threw his arms around me and said, "Brother, will you please tell me the true facts?" Then he took me home with him. The truth was that when Amanullah Khan was about to leave for Europe, Shaukat Ali gave a magnificent reception for him and delivered an address in his honor. After the party, when farewell had been said, people told me that Amanullah had not given Shaukat Ali as much money as he expected, and therefore Shaukat Ali was annoyed with the king.